Sorry. I want everybody, put your hands up in the air, stretch, reach that ceiling as far as you can. Okay, arms out to the side. Let's move in circles to the forward. Let's go back. One more to the ceiling. All right, let's put them down, shake them loose. Now we'll call practice to begin. So this presentation is, my wife just came in to look at me like, what in the world are you doing? Anyway, what this presentation I've been doing for a long time. I've done it at universities, I've done it at community development seminars, and it's something that this is not out of a textbook. This is not like some class you went to that I learned all this from. Everything you're going to hear from me tonight has been my experiences of my 15 years of being a developer and all the mistakes I made. So this is a total a whole bunch of information, sorry, about all my failures and all the things I learned from that I came to understand that this is actually, there's a development process, that there is a beginning and an end. What most people do in development, even those who've been around forever and ever and ever, they always seem to start in the middle of the process and they work their way out. So that's where many of you will start, because somebody's going to give you a free piece of land or a donation, or it's land that's been in your family forever, or your church owns the land next door to them. And so you're going to make something happen on that because it's easy to get. There's a vision for it. And so now you start working out from there. That's all the failures I have is when I started in the middle and I ignored that there is actually a beginning and an end. So that's what my goal tonight is, to help walk you through where you start and how you end up. The first slide here is about organization and the strategic planning, goal setting that you need to undertake. In organization, it starts, when I say organization, that doesn't mean necessarily a legal entity. It could just be you as an individual and organizing yourself about what you want to do in the world of development. There are questions that you have to ask yourself before you do anything else. And the first one of those is to decide on who do you want to serve. You know, it seems like an easy question. It might be for you as an individual, but for groups like nonprofits, like faith-based groups, couple partners coming together that they want to renovate some single-family homes in the neighborhood. As soon as you have more than one of you, there's a point where you have to gain some consensus and understanding about who you want to serve. Now, you know, there's a lot of categories of who that is. It could be somebody's income group. It could be somebody's age that you want to serve, senior citizens. Maybe it's just families, children. It could be people with disabilities. Could be people with substance abuse issues, domestic violence victims. Could be single homeless men, single homeless women. I mean, the list goes on and on and on about answering that question, who do you want to serve? And that, especially in a group, sometimes if you don't answer that question, you get down the road, you find out that you did not have agreement of who that group of people is that you want to serve. I'll give you an example what happens here at the end of this slide. But the next thing is, if you've figured out who you want to serve, you want to determine how do you want to serve them. Well, what's that mean? Do I want to develop something for them? Do I just want to build it? Do I want to provide services? Yes, you know, really, those questions like, you know, what do you really want to do and what's that look like to serve that group of people? Now, if you decide that you want to develop for them, you want to develop housing, or you want to develop a mixed use development, or you want to convert a school into a community center, or you want to build single family homes for sale, that's how you want to serve them. See, there's a lot of different categories in that about how you want to serve them: single family, multifamily, rental, for sale, community centers, all those things. That's that step. The third one then is, what role do you want to play in that? This is again where it gets it can be difficult, because if you're working with other people, the tendency is, first thing out of the box, you want to control everything. I want 100% ownership of everything because I have total control. I also get all the money. I get to say everything that's going to happen when you have that. But what you have to understand is that when you take on 100% of owning something, you have 100% of all the upside and you have 100% of all the downside. A lot of people don't think about the downside, but you have to focus on the risks that you're taking on, because you're going to sign things that you're personally going to guarantee. And you need to understand what that risk is. Now, some you're going to say, you know what, that scares me. I still want to do this. I still want to learn, you know, I want to be an owner, but I know I can't do it all. So it means you have to find a partner, which means you have to give up control. As an emerging developer, whatever it is that you know, how you want to serve that group of people, if you've never done this before, it's difficult because you have to go somewhere to get money from somebody, right? You got to borrow it, you got to get a grant, you got to get investors. And if they look and see that you've never done this, you might not have a financial statement yet, then partnering, you're going to get to that point pretty quick. You're going to have to partner with somebody. Now you got to be careful when you partner. You want to make sure you have a good, solid partner that has integrity, is known for it. They know what they're doing. They actually do have a financial statement, which you want to see, that their references in the community of the work that they've done, you've checked that. You've verified that they're a good person, they're a good organization, they have financing, they have the contacts that you need. There may be a third choice here. Now, I doubt it, because you're all in this class because you're looking at getting into development, but you may decide, I don't want to have any ownership. I don't want that risk. I just want to be the group or the person that is the conduit to serve the people that I want to serve in the way I want to serve them. If it's through rental housing, for sale housing, I want my community center in my neighborhood to be done. Whatever that is, you look to be the conduit to bring the development community in to create that vision that you have, physically create that vision that you have. This step is very, very important. If you don't get these answers agreed upon and understood, and you move on, you don't pay attention to this, you go into these other steps I'm going to talk about tonight, more likely than not, you'll have failure or some form of failure. You will lose money. You may not have the credibility that you would like in the community if you don't focus on this. Some of you heard, because I touched on this in the class on Thursday, but one of the very first deals that we did at the fund was a permanent supportive housing development, new construction, first of its kind in Michigan at the time, for homeless mothers with their kids. The executive director of the church, faith-based group that ran the shelter, in the church, it was her vision to do this. And we came in, and actually I was a developer at that time. I started that development as a developer, and then I started the fund. So I was able to kind of keep it with me. We got all the way through then, going into the closing. We're sitting at the closing table. When you won't come into a closing, it's a stack of documents that are like this, that everybody has to sign. So she had her board of directors there. And the attorney starts putting papers in front of them, explaining what that paper was that they were signing. Well, there are a couple of people didn't realize that this was the group of people who they were going to serve. They thought they were a shelter operation and that this was just an improvement of the shelter, and they were just going to focus on the single men that were homeless that had always been kind of their focus. So they were like, no, this isn't even who we're supposed to serve. What happened here? And then when you got into the risk part of it, those individuals refused to sign because they didn't know that there was actually risk here. They thought this was all kind of like free, and that owning was not something that there was risk to. So then when they saw that they could be at risk personally, but also the organization, they refused to sign. Closing fell apart. We had to regroup. We had to start from this point with that board and go through every one of these steps with them to be able to get that closing back. It took 3 months before we got back to the closing where we had everybody in agreement about what this was, who they're going to serve, how, and what role they're going to play, and what are the risks. So this is not something to like gloss over. I had one group, took me 7 years before they could answer these questions amongst the board of directors, which was okay. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's real. 7 years. And when they finally got agreement on this, they've done 4, 5 developments now very, very successfully. But because they took the time to actually answer this. So let's assume now you've answered these 3 questions and we move on. What's next then? Is you have to look at the market. And for me, because I come from a urban planning market research view of the world of development, that market is everything. If you don't know what the market is for who you want to serve, I don't know how you determine financial feasibility of a development. Okay. So, but what I see is people starting in the middle, buying the land, and then say, okay, now we have to develop it. And they work backwards to who they want to serve. And then it comes down to they're ready to go into the bank or the state housing authority to get a mortgage. And they're told, hey, have you got your market study? No. And so then they do the market study and they find out there isn't even a market for what it is they spent all this money and time on. So market to me is everything. Now, why is that? What does the market do for you? What does a market study do for you? What does a market research? You can do your own research besides a third party that eventually you're going to have to talk to. Market study, market research will tell you the basic things that you build your financial feasibility off of. Tells you the number of units you can build, which could be multifamily, could be single family homes. It could be the unit would be the commercial space that you might be looking at doing, could be the community center that you're looking at doing, whatever this stuff applies to, all real estate. It's not just affordable housing. It's not just single family, for sale. This is all real estate, but it'll tell you the number of units. I'll stick to housing right now. It'll tell you the bedroom mix, how many ones, how many twos, how many threes. Tell you how much rent can be charged or what you can sell the houses for. And the rent could be for a commercial space. Tells you what amenities you have to make it attractive for people to want to invest their money in, to rent or buy. Big thing here is you got to know what your competition is. I'll ask the question now is, and I'm going to go to an easy one just to see how y'all can see how this works, but I'm going to go to Josh White, who's in Detroit, who's with our development company. Josh, I'm calling on you, man. Why would you want to know what the competition is?
Yeah, you have to be able to set your pricing, what you're going to charge, the amenities, and what amenities you would want to include in your development. Those are a couple of big ones.
The other thing is too, when you check comparables, you don't just check what's been built. You have to go and check with the planning department, the assessors department, the building department, see if there's been permits pulled or there's permits in action, that there's a pipeline of deals that are going through the planning commission or the planning department that look like what you want to do. You have to incorporate that into the information in your market research, because that's all competition that you have to count those numbers against what you're trying to do, which means you may have to subtract off some of those units you think you want to do. So then you get, the next thing is the market research will tell you what the capture rate is. This is kind of a hard one to understand. It was for me when I first got into doing market research, but the capture rate, what your market study will do, will identify the entirety of the population that might be eligible to want to, or are potentials that would qualify to live in the development that you may be doing. It's the entire demographic of that will be identified. So if you're looking at, I'm just going to pick, you want to do a senior citizen development that's targeted for people at 60% or less their area median income. You'll identify the entire group of people that are interested in, let's just say, pick rental housing, that are interested in that income category at that age group, that would be interested in renters, because there's data out there that shows how many people in that group of people would be willing to consider the possibility of renting, because there are percentages of people who rent now today that would rent again. There are people in for sale housing, especially seniors, that want to go to rental. That information is documented, so you would apply that to that group of people. So now, out of that subset of all those senior citizens at or below 60%, you've got those that you've broken down one more level to how many you think would rent. Now, how many of those people are you going to capture with building 50 units that you think you want to build? So the higher that percentage out of that group of people, the weaker the market is. You can see, I'll use an example. Let's say there's 100 people that's in that demographic that are your target for possibilities that they would rent at your property. And you're going to build 50 units for that 100 people. That's a capture rate saying you're going to capture 50% of those people are all going to move into your property. That is a weak market. Okay. The lower the capture rate, the stronger the market is. So if you're going to do that 50 units and you have 2,000 people who are in that category, that's a pretty low capture rate. So that shows you that market is actually underserved and stronger for what you want to develop. So it's an important theory to understand when you're doing market research. Now, that last one is absorption rate. That's really important for investors and for lenders and construction lenders, because what this tells you is how fast those units are going to sell or rent. The longer it takes to sell, the longer it takes to rent, determines the rate of return that an investor is going to get. And also, it's a problem for a construction lender if their construction loan is going to be out a long period of time and you're not going to have the ability to pay that because you haven't got enough people in there to convert to your permanent debt yet. Okay. So absorption rate, again, I'll use an example of senior housing. Seniors typically are not the ones themselves that make a decision to move. They don't want to move. They want to stay in the house that they raise their kids in, and that's where they want to stay. When the decision comes to rent, it takes multiple times of looking at properties before they make that decision. And that decision usually is made by the influence of their children. So how fast every month do seniors actually sign a lease and move in? It's typically 2 to 3 units a month in a rental property. That's your absorption rate per month. So when you look at, you got 50 units and you're only renting and occupying 2 to 3 a month, you look at that rent up period, that factors in now your financial feasibility. Now for family deals, in an average normal market, you usually can look at something like 10 to 12 units a month would be kind of normal. In a super saturated, a super hot market, it's much higher than that. But on average, in that range, if you have a capture rate that's reasonable, that's typically what you see. So let's go back. I'm going to ask, my first question is, where did you start with this to decide to even do the market study? I mean, what information have you already made a decision on that you are going to do your market research on?
Is it if I came in late, who do you want to serve? How do you want to serve? And what role do you want to play?
Yes. Yeah, for coming in late, you had it.
Thank
That's
you.
good. No, that's exactly right. Because you got to refer, as you're doing this work, don't forget those 3 things that you started with. I'm going to keep bringing you back to that. As we walk our way through, you're going to see how this builds. So now you're at a point. Market research, what's it tell you? I'll just keep using this 50 units as an example. Does it tell you that there's a market for 50 units? Is the capture rate something less than 15%? Is the absorption rate in a reasonable period of time that you can rent it up to give the people with the money in it their rate of return that they want? If you look at that and the answer is no, what do? I'll ask that question now. What do you do if that market research is showing that you're in a thin market, that 50 units, the market says this it doesn't look like it's going to work. What are you going to do?
Would you then lessen your units?
That's one of the things you would look at is, okay, you do less units. That'd be the first thing.
Would you change? What about changing your demographics?
Well, if you change your demographics, you're going against that first question on who you want to serve.
Okay.
So if you're going to change demographics, you got to go back to that first step and revisit all those questions again.
Got it.
Which is okay. That's actually what I want you to do. Most people won't do it. Most people will take this information and say, okay, nice information. I'm still going to do 50 units because I'm going to make more money in it. So now they just keep forcing it ahead. But this is a very important time as your first chance, to go ahead or cut bait and start over. So let's assume that market study was positive. You hit all the right numbers. It looks like from a marketplace, it's doable. Now, this is where you got to determine the financial feasibility of the development. Now, I'm going to go back, what are the things that are important to know to be able to do that financial feasibility, which the financial feasibility is going to tell you how much debt this property can carry, what the gap is in your financing, where you have to go find other sources of financing, be it equity, investment, your own money, grants, foundation, the state, the city, wherever, the pots are. And what information out of that market study do you have that helps you determine that? I'll go one more step, then I'll ask that question again. When you're looking at determining how much debt a property can handle, that debt is calculated off of how much rent or for sale proceeds that you're going to get in the property. So if you're going to do 50 units, and let's just say they're all 2 bedrooms, you're going to rent them all at $500 a month, which is unheard of, but let's just say that for the example. That 50 units, you have to assume you're always going to have some kind of vacancy in it, right? It's never going to be fully full because you have people moving out, passing away, getting evicted, whatever. There's always people coming and going. So you're always going to have a certain number of those units that you're not going to collect rent every month on. So we usually look at something like it depends on the type of property, but basically something in the 93 to 95% occupancy. So you got a 5 to 6% vacancy rate. You factor that in. You subtract that right out of the gross amount of rent potential you have in that 50 units. So now you got this cash coming in every month of rent based on 95% occupancy all the time. Now that's gross. Now you got to subtract out, you have expenses to run these properties, right? So you have to subtract all those expenses off of that. That comes out of your cash that you've collected. So you got to pay your site staff. You got to pay the property manager, the leasing agents, the maintenance people. You got to pay to mow the lawns. You got to pay to snow plow. You have to, all the things that go into you got to pay insurance, security sometimes. These are all things that come out of that gross rent that you have to calculate in. So at the end, what you have is net operating income, and that's what the bank or investor is going to look like. They're going to look at, this is the cash you have to pay me back. If I give you a loan, I know that's where that's going to come from. So that information, where would you get the information to be able to do? How you know how much rent you're going to collect? Comes out of the market study. The market studies told you how many units you can do, how many bedrooms, what the bedroom mix is, what your amenities are, which have costs. That's all out of that market study. That's the first thing you do to start building that financial feasibility or pro forma. You've got the units, you got the bedrooms, you've got the rents, have all been identified. Now, the question I usually get at this point in time is, well, where do I get expenses? Well, there's free resources. People like us that invest in developments like this or lend on developments, we have a database of over 50,000 units that we can tell you exactly what it costs in your market to operate that kind of development that you want to do. Banks have that information. A lot of the state housing authorities have that kind of a database. So that's a source. That's where you go to get real operating expenses, real-time operating expenses. Next question I get, well, I don't know how much it's going to cost because you got to factor in construction costs because what's the total development cost of this thing? Again, there are databases with us, with banks. You're going to talk to a construction lender here at some point. They have cost estimates. Any agency that's doing allocations of tax credits has to have a cost cert at the end, so they have that data. And similar sources for single-family homes. So there are places to go, to get that information for free, and it's timely, it's credible information. So that is how you build a financial feasibility. Again, now, you're always going to have a gap because nobody provides 100% financing. So there's always going to be a gap. So you got to identify what it is, and you have to then look at what are the typical resources that I can go to. And you'll be able, from those resources, you'll be able to see the size of what they usually allocate. And you make the assumption of what that might be, you put it in your pro forma. And if you still have a huge gap after the end of all this, what should you do? This is another one of these checkpoints to check yourself. Okay. Adam?
I was going to say identify ways for the cost that you've already identified to be reduced.
Yep, that's a place to always start, is look at, are we being as efficient as we can be? Gotta be careful. This is another, because developers are the eternal optimists. Okay, so they look at all these numbers that, well, if I just move this, I'll reduce this here, or I'll reduce this here. I know I can operate this better than what those people are. And so you end up creating something that's not based on reality. It's just so you keep moving forward. You have to go back and assess that, but you got to be careful that you're not tricking yourself. But you do have to look at it that way. Now, if at the end of that you still have this gap, then this is a time for you to seriously look at, this might not be feasible. And it's a time to stop. And it's time to now go back to the beginning if you want, and look at, okay, maybe I'm missing here. And you kind of come back at looking at the market again. Maybe there's some segments of the market that you cut out because you answered that question, who you want to serve. Maybe that was too limiting. Maybe you do a mixed income development or broaden the demographic about who you want to serve without violating what your vision is.
And can you also receive like different grants and tax credits from like local, like city governments and things like that? Because I've seen, like I read in the paper, a lot of like the development that happened in Wilmington, they receive certain tax credits and incentives just for, doing things like this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's part of the process you as a developer have to do. This is part of your building your pro forma and understanding the market. You have to reach out to those. This is part of what you have to educate yourself on in doing development, is where are all these sources that can fill my gap. Cities have certain sort, everywhere is different. Unfortunately, there isn't one size that fits all. But that's what you have to do, is you have to reach out to the state, to the county, to the city, to foundations, and find out what are the resources that they have that can help you fill this gap. So
I got a question. I don't know if it's really a question, but from what you're showing me so far, from the notes I've taken and what I'm seeing so far, and I've heard you say like 3 times how we revert back to the beginning. I'm getting the impression, and please help me here, but I'm getting the impression that we are doing checkpoints at every area to solidify the foundation that we're building, simply to make sure that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, so that financially we're in a pit and that we're in a place where we may be too far to come back. So because it looks like you're making checkpoints quite frequently, and then you want to put that foundation like really solid before you actually go to a full step 2, really solid before we go to a full step 3. Now, am I getting this right?
Emmanuel, you're right on. I mean, I wish every developer understood it the way you just explained it, because all of our lives on the investment side, on the lending side, and, you know, for those that I used to joint venture partner on development with, it would make our lives all a lot better and a lot easier. And there'd be a lot more people being housed today than are, because of what you described as the way to do it. That's why you do that, is you constantly have to be checking at each one of these steps to make sure you're not going to get yourself into a financial mess. Because man, if you get too far in and you end up defaulting on a loan, you got a record that's going to follow you kind of forever. That's why you want to make sure you do this right, especially the first time out. The last thing you want to do is the first development you ever did is that you ignored all these steps and you ended up in financial ruin, and you want to try to do it again. That's why I really stress this so hard. Okay, let's agree that all of this, the financial feasibility looked pretty good to do this development that you have a vision for, okay? So what happens now? This next step is how you mitigate some of these risks that I talked about in determining financial feasibility, the market, and that is there are people out there that you want to align yourself with even after the very first step. After you've answered those 3 questions, it's really where you start looking at building members of your development team. So I do have to give you a warning. I have 4 dogs. I have one that is attached at my side in a bed on the desk with me every waking hour of the day when I'm working at home. He gets anxious sometimes and will start barking. So he's starting that up. I have to let him out the door. I'll be right back. All right. So the development team. I'm going to start with this slide, tells you the whole story. I really could end up not talking about it, development team anymore if you just listen to this, but we'll go through in a lot more detail than I did the other night. It's very, very important, especially when you're beginning, is that you only work with team members that have experience in development, design, management, all the rest of your development team, that they have that experience in the type of housing you're proposing to do, the type of commercial space you're talking about doing, the type of single family homes that you're going to sell. It's my overriding statement on everything we're going to talk about for the next few minutes here is the development team is, again, this is the thing, especially with faith-based groups, notoriously, who want to do development, but also with nonprofits who want to do development. There seems to be, in general, a lack of trust of anyone outside of their circle. And so what they end up doing is they look at people they know. So they look at one of the deacon's cousins is an architect. So they call that cousin up and say, hey, would you do design for this 50-unit senior citizen development I want to do on the church property next door that we have for free? So they come in because they feel safe because they know them. Or they know a builder who is in the congregation who all they've ever built is single family homes for $350,000 for sale price. But they want them to come in and build a 50-unit multifamily development. Or they want them to come in and build single family homes that have to be affordable. They go to an attorney who says, I'll do this for pro bono. I'll take care of you. But they've never worked on loan documents or partnership agreements that relate to the type of development that you're going to do. Happens all the time. So your choices that you make in regards to who you're going to put around you as your team is really critical. So we'll get into this is where we're going to get interactive. This is what I usually do, I'll tell you, and I can't do it. This is the first time I've ever done this virtually. So I couldn't come, I didn't know what I was going to do. And we had Mimi and Roger, we all had this talk about how am I going to do this? And so this is the best I can do, because usually what I do is I'm in some costume. I set up 2 chairs in the room. I got one chair on one far side of the room, and I got the other where I stand on. I do the rest of the presentation stand on a chair. I started talking about the development team members, and I would call one of you up, like Brandon. I'd call on you to come up and be my market analyst, and you would come up front. I'd hand you a dartboard with a map of Wilmington on it, and that would be how people used to think I would determine markets, was throwing darts at a dartboard. So you would be our market analyst. You would stand there. Then I go the next person, call up out of the audience to, you know, come up and represent all the team members, and each one of those bring the chair a little in front of them. And pretty soon, by the end, the chair's right next to me, and I can step right over to my vision of what my development is without getting hurt. But it took all these people to make that happen. That's my vision. Now, every one of you would have a prop that you'd be standing up there holding for like the next 30 minutes. But I can't do that now. So what we came up with is I'm going to call on you, and I'm going to ask you, when I say, Brandon, I want you to be our market analyst. I want you to take a look at that slide, and I'd like to have you add to it, but I want you to describe what a market analyst would do and what you're looking for in an analyst. So Brandon, I'm calling on you. You're going to be our market analyst. Come on up front.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So you tell me about what you are, what you do as a market analyst.
You want to analyze the market to see different comps, rentals, just observe the area pretty much.
What kind of experience should you have to be able to do that for me?
I guess a realtor experience or some type of real estate experience.
I would ask you, what I would ask you if you're going to be my market analyst, I'd want to see the market studies that you've done for senior citizen housing that is targeted to people at 60% of the area median income or not. I'd want to know that you had done work and study in that population and what their needs are. And also the fact that you would know where to look and go to in regards to what comparables would be. You would also know what the movership traits would be within the senior population, because they are unique. There are things that they look for that you as an analyst could tell me as a developer, I need to have in that property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the thing. It's not all market analysts are the same. Some people think, you know, a lot of people think I got my market analyst, but they have specialties. There are people, I've just used Michigan, for example. If I'm doing a development, if I'm going to invest in a development in Detroit, whatever that is, it could be for supportive housing, senior citizens, families. I'm not going to use a market analyst that his experience is doing family housing in Grand Rapids, right, or Chicago. I want somebody who has a database of focus on senior housing that's done in Detroit, in that marketplace. Mm-hmm. Really important, because they're not all the same. There's a handful out there that our specialty is in permit supportive housing. Right. That's who you want to work with.
Okay.
Okay. So next up is developer. Now, I'm going to assume that all of you emerging developers, this could be your first, maybe second development that you've done. So you're going to have to partner with somebody who is a developer. So I'm looking here, Andrea Wilson. I'd like to have you come up front, and I'd like to have you be our developer. Now, if I'm looking at you to be my co-partner as a developer, what are the things that you're providing for me, and what should I look for? And in my mind, this is normally if the person comes up, I put a captain's hat on, because you are the captain of the ship as a developer. You coordinate everything that goes on with this development.
All right. You want to make sure that I have some experience in the field that you're looking for. So if you're looking to partner with seniors and make sure seniors are good, making sure I understand that demographic and may have experience in already building or partnering with those type of buildings, because they may they're going to require ramps and things of that sort, maybe extended parking for buses and shuttles. So you want somebody that's going to have experience with that. You also want me to be knowledgeable what's going on in the community as far as the community approvals. You want me to develop some relationships with the city and planning committees, so I know what's up and coming in the neighborhoods. Also, I need to look at the performance and make sure that they're sound, taking into account the vacancy rates and things of that sort. So basically, I'm the overseer of kind of the project. I'm going to have close ties with the marketing analyst, the bank, and just making sure that I develop great relationships. I know the area, I know the people, and I know the community needs.
Exactly. Yep. You also, if I'm going to be your partner, I want to know that you're a loving, kind, caring partner, that you understand what my needs are, and you're not going to take advantage of me.
Mark, can you take a market analyst question now, or do you want to wait until the end of this?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, as long as we're not too far from that, that's good.
Okay. The question was from Tish Williams, and she asks, do market analysts look at how to bring the demographic to an area as opposed to looking at the current population?
What the market analyst will do is determine what the actual market area is. And that's not just drawing a concentric circle around, a community. There are natural boundaries and human boundaries of where people will move from. So an example, one I know the most is in Detroit. A West Sider in Detroit will never move to the East Side, and vice versa. Now, if a market analyst didn't understand that, they would draw the entire city of Detroit as the market for what would you draw from. So they can tell you demographically where you're going to draw from and where you can't, or you probably aren't going to be able to market to. There's another piece of your development team here. You'll see where I go on that question. There's an answer for it, but it's not the market analyst. Other than they define the market area based on natural and human boundaries. So the next one, the title company. This is one, a lot of people don't pay attention to this at all. They just think all title companies are the same. This is when you start looking at land, and then you need them at closing, like severely at closing, is you want to have a title company that understands the type of property that you're buying. And if you're in urban core communities, clear title is a dicey thing to get, especially if it's land bank or it's under some urban renewal designation. Number of areas are people who have gotten these properties and they've signed multiple land contracts with people that haven't been cleared. Some have been recorded, some haven't. You look at the chain of title of ownership, and in core communities, it can be really, really messy. So you got to have a title company understands how do you manage through that, not only understand it, but they got to have an underwriter. See, all title companies have an underwriter insurance company behind them that is ensuring that when a title person says you have clear title, that you truly have clear title. And if you don't, if there's something comes up later, that underwriter is going to step up and resolve it financially to protect the title holder. Okay, that's the whole idea of title. So title company will identify all the encumbrances, like back taxes, like easements, all the things that are the surprises. They will identify those for you before you get yourself all tied up into a piece of property. They're there with you at the end to actually handle the closing when you close on that land. They're with you at the end when you start construction because they will process construction draws and make those capital contributions to the subs. They represent you kind of through the whole thing through the end of construction. You want to make sure they know what they're doing and that they have the ability to work on and understand the type of property that you are acquiring. So that's why that's so important. I kind of jumped it, but I'm going to just, Tamara, can I have you be our title person, please? Because I just did your whole presentation, so you don't
Sure.
have to do anything. I got ahead of myself.
Okay.
Sorry. So I'm not putting you on the spot too bad. So the next one is architect. Let's see. Allie Foster. There you are. I'd like to have you be our architect and come on up front and tell me about yourself and what you're going to do for me as a developer that makes you a great architect for what I need.
Well, based off of what the slide says, it's developing plans for the site and for the building, and working with the general contractor and creating specifications and participating in preparation of bid documents.
There you go. Now, have you actually designed a building of 50 units for senior citizens before in Wilmington?
Have I personally, or should I have?
No. As my architect, have you?
I should have.
Okay, and since you should have, you have, I guess. So I'd like to go out and see it. Could you take me out to see it and show me the plans that were actually built?
I should be able to.
Okay, good. Well, I'd like to do that because I want to see what you've done. I also, what I'd like you to do is bring the general contractor, which I'd like to jump to that one, Deanna. Yep, go to till you get to it. I think it's a couple more. One more. Yeah, there we go. I'd like to have you bring the general contractor with you when we go out to look at what you built and what you designed, because I'd like to hear from that person what it was like to build your plans and what issues he had that he ran into on site that led to change orders or design issues that once it got built that could have been done differently, that could have saved money. So I'm going to call on Michael C. Michael?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Michael, I want you to be our general contractor because I'd like to have you go out with Allie and tell me about what you ran into in building that property she designed. So you could tell me why you would be a great contractor for me and what you do?
I mean, basically in regards to the experience of general contractor, I've been working in the field for about 15 years. Been able to do residential and commercial projects. just kind of going through some of the things that need to be taken care of in this regard.
So when I'm looking at this 50 unit development that you built under Ally's design, how many other senior citizen developments have you ever done that I could go and look at?
Oh, well, this is definitely be the third project of.
Okay, well, that, 3 isn't bad. I'd like to have more, but I definitely want to go and look at what you built. And I also want to talk with your subcontractors to see if
Right.
you actually paid them on time.
Okay.
Okay, so is it all right if I call a couple of your subs and talk to your plumber and your electrician to see what it was like to work with you?
Yeah, for sure. I think,
Okay.
giving
Good.
those is up.
So these two people, the architect and the contractor, are really important because they're inherently wired to argue with each other. Okay, so you want those two in sync with you as your architect is doing those plans, which should have already been done at least once. Contractor hopefully has built it before or something like it, that they're working together as those plans get done and the specs are getting drawn up. Because you don't want to wait until you got all the plans done and then you take it to a contractor and say, give me a bid on this, and find out that you're $1 million over what you thought it was going to be because the contractor built in all kinds of issues as what he saw in the plans. So that's why you want these two, you want them on your team in the very beginning working together. Contractor provide value engineering from a costing standpoint. Your architect can do the design, and if they're knowing, already, they've already designed one that works. So they kind of know the design standards that they're designing to. All right. Now, there's a question that came up about how do you find good general contractors? First of all, I would check my sources in regards to lenders, investors. I'd also talk to the community, like the planning department and building department, because when you go in and say, I need to know who a good general contractor might be that does senior housing, multifamily, that's done it before that you know of. That's the first place you start. You just kind of cut your list down. At least they've done something. So then I interview them. I don't just walk out and pick one. I'll take 3 that I think are really, really strong based on references and that. And then I meet with them. And I want to see, do they have the vision that I have? Do they understand the vision? Do they understand the people I want to serve? And if you can make that connection, and then you check their references, you check with their banks, you check that they actually can get bonded, and you check with their subs to see if they pay on time. And if all those things come up good, that probably would be a good one to hook up with.
Mark, we have a couple questions, if you don't mind. From Adam, do you have any recommendations for finding, and this is in big letters and quotes, quality general contractors?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I just outlined. That's what I would do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the question I saw that I was addressing. Yeah.
And did you get the next question? Is this actually a research issue in finding these people? I assume they're referring to general contractors, a manual, if you want to clarify that question, maybe.
Actually, he did the very same thing. That was my question. He answered it. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, just making sure we got everybody. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go backwards here to a green consultant. This is kind of a new thing. You got to be careful with this. And this is where I get in trouble with some people because, normally when I ask somebody to come up, I have a t-shirt they put on that says tree hugger. So is anybody here into kind of green community? If not, I'll just call on somebody. How about
I am.
Okay,
trees.
thank you. I love it. You stepped up. All
Yeah, I like
right, tell me about yourself as a green consultant. What are you doing for me?
Well, I have nationwide accolades where I have partnered with various developers, architects, general contractors to make suggestions on their plans to be green. I mean, we only have one planet, Mark, so we got to do our best to make sure each and every property that we build contributes to our planet in a positive way and lowers our footprint. And by doing so, I conduct a planning charade to bring all the parties together. I am conducting meetings. We're going over plans. I mean, I'm racking bills up because essentially, right, to be green and be energy
you
efficient,
are.
it's going to cost. It's going to cost some money. So, but we got to think of the end goal, and the end goal here is that we are making our planet very sustainable. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be some tax credits, some subsidies, some grants or something down the line, because this is important in all honesty. You know, solar
Yep.
panels, windmills, this is actually solving problems on major scale. So I'm here to make sure that we're keeping the earth in mind as we develop these plans. And yes, racking up the bills slightly.
Yes. Well, I know that in making a building as green as it can be, the end benefit is to the residents themselves because their utility bills are going to be lower, which that's what we want. We want this as affordable as possible to somebody who is going to buy a house or who is going to rent an apartment. At the same time, I also know that if I go too green, I'm going to increase my construction costs by 20 to 25%. I'm not sure my budget can handle that for my financial feasibility, okay? So we need to work that out. Now, the other thing I've learned is that it's great to be green in a property, but once it's up and operating, that equipment is like really high tech, and there's not a lot of people that know how to service it. And parts to repair those things are not readily available. So what happens if all the motherboards get fried from a strike of lightning in my air conditioning system on the roof, and I call you to come out to get repairs, and you tell me that this is so high tech, the parts are in Japan and we have to order them. So maybe I want a different air conditioning system that isn't quite as green, because I'm not sure operationally we can handle something like that happening, and then the additional cost is going to come out of my budget. So this is when I look for, I'm going to switch from the show. When I look for a green consultant, I want one, if you're doing affordability in any form or another, I want them to understand reasonableness.
You've got a question in the chat box, Mark, from Montavious. What happens when you're required to bid out a project and have to take the low bidder? You can't interview them. I'm assuming he's saying because of budget constraints.
Well, it depends on, now if you're working for a public agency.
Right, Mark, let me can I clarify the question real quick?
Yeah.
So sometimes, yeah, like you were saying, you are working with the public agency and they require you to bid out the project and you have to take the low bidder. Well, then you're kind of just stuck with that contractor, that GC, even though you might not want to go with them. They might have never done the projects you want or to the scale you want, but since they were low bid, you had to go with them.
Yeah, I actually, I don't think the value of that money is worth it, of whatever they're giving you. I'm an absolute non-believer in bidding jobs out like that and having to take the low bidder. Because when you do that, you have a contractor that has not worked with the design team. And when they look at, this is what you're going to get, is you're going to get a low bid. But the way the contractor looks at those plans, they're looking at where all the interpretable gaps are in the design, that when they start construction, they're going to hit you with change orders. So what may be the low bid at the end of the day could be the high bid. And that's what happens. I'm like totally against the blind bid process and having to take the low bid no matter what. I know public agencies like public housing authorities, they get stuck with this a lot. And which is why you see a lot of the problems that the PHAs have in maintaining and operating their properties, because they're stuck with rules like that. The attorney, Lori, you want to be our attorney? Tell me about yourself and why would I work with you?
Well, I'm very experienced in real estate development and financing. And I can prepare all our organization documents. I can assist in our local approvals. I can prepare and review the partnership documents. I can help you with your legal opinions and conduct closing due diligence. So it's all around, I'm all around great attorney for this project.
Okay. Well, if I call the Delaware State Housing Authority and ask them, how many deals have you closed with Lori as an attorney? And they say, well, yeah, we've done 5, but it was a nightmare. Okay.
That's not going to happen. I have a great relationship with Delaware State Housing Authority.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So that's good. The attorney is really important because they're there. I mean, they really are there to protect you in the documents and negotiating, helping you negotiate those documents so you're protected. They're there to protect you from the investor, from the lender, and anybody else that you're entering into an agreement with. And you want somebody that has done this almost like for their living already to represent you. And you want them in the beginning. Don't wait until you're down the road and, oh, now I got to go to get to the attorney to draft the documents. All right, we've done the general contractor. Now we're in, this is another very, very, very important piece of your puzzle here as a development team. Let me see here. Ebony.
I'm here.
All right. I'm going to ask you to come up front and represent your property management company.
Absolutely.
Now, normally when I have you come up in my presentation, if it was physical, I'd hand you a plunger to have to stand there and hold, because that's really what most people think property managers are, which is totally wrong, but that's a myth. That's a perception though. So tell me about your property management company and what you'll do for me, and what's been your experience in renting or selling to the people that I want to serve.
We're experienced in residential and commercial and financing programs, type of developments, and being proposed. Prepares budgets. We prepare marketing management plans, meets monitoring compliance, completes ongoing maintenance, meets financial needs of partnership. We have over 10 years of maintenance property. We also do deal with the smaller things when we do go out with the plungers and we do go out to paint. We definitely make sure that we break down the budget so we can make sure that we keep the cost in the pro forma when we have to consider all costs and budgets and things of such nature.
Now, if I went out and I talked with your vendors that you use, would I hear that you pay your bills on time?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good, because if you didn't, I'm probably getting upcharged by those vendors if I use you.
Use you, absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's another thing, and if Ebony's never done property management, let's say for a permanent supportive housing development, last person you want to use would be Ebony, okay? Because that's a specialized kind of work in managing a property like that. The expenses there are different. The social issues are different. You want her staff to be skilled in dealing with the support issues that the people need. You want them tied into the support community of the other agencies, that you'll bring in to serve those people. I also get to the question that Roger posed in regards to, does the market analyst basically, part of their role is to draw the people out of that demographic to come to the property? It's the property manager's job to do that. Okay, what the property manager will do is they'll look at that market study, look at what the market area is, look at what all that data says, and then they will craft a marketing leasing plan to attract those people to the property. They will have a leasing person on staff who understands the market, knows how to tap that market, and knows how to get the people to come to the property and ultimately sign a lease to live there or buy the house. So the property manager is another one. They're a forgotten group that tend to not get brought in till the very end of this whole process. You want them, they actually should be there with your contractor and your architect. When the plans are being done, when the contractor's looking at costing, there's so much information a property manager can tell you about how a property will operate based on its design and how it's built. That will save you money from an operations standpoint and potentially could save you money even on construction. But people don't realize, they just think that they carry a plunger. And they're so much more talented than that. And you need to tap that as part of your team in the very, very beginning.
There's one more question from Emmanuel, and that's, does a property manager work with the accountant to view property depreciation for proactive maintenance and lessen costs and budget preparation?
Yeah, actually, the property manager should be right at that table with you and doing all the budget creation, not just for when you're starting, but every year. There's accounting issues with that, especially depending on what your source of financing is. If you got housing tax credits involved, your property management company has to do financial reports and accounting reports to the investors. So they're very much involved in the kind of the accounting, reporting, financial side of the property once it's up and running.
We got a few other questions, actually. Do you want me to keep rolling with them now?
Yeah, let's do a couple more.
Okay. From Adam, it's what are your thoughts on self-managing versus hiring property managers for smaller scale deals? Is the next one.
Depends on what you mean by scale. If you're talking about 3 or 4 houses, that's something that, self-manage. I mean, you're going to get a real lesson if you've never done it. That's hard work. And a lot of people aren't prepared for what that means. But, beyond that, when you start getting up into, in my mind, anything more than 12, you need professional management of some type. Now, if you yourself are basically coming out of wanting to build a management company, then I would partner with an experienced property management company to provide maybe those on-site services that are needed, and let that property management company do all the backroom accounting, financial reporting, operating budget maintenance, eligibility of the tenants, all the background checks and that kind of thing. Because that requires systems, and you have to have those systems to manage a property. So that's my suggestion on that.
And there's one from Brenda, which you should be able to read too, and that's what if you can't find a well-qualified, well-recommended property manager with specific experience in your niche and your market, or any role for that matter? Do you go with someone that's good without direct experience, or do you go with someone with direct experience but a questionable reputation?
Oh boy. What I would do, I'd go with a lot of experience, maybe questionable side, but you as that owner, that you got to manage that. Then you got to manage that property manager on a consistent basis to manage against maybe what they did wrong before. I would not, for an emerging developer, I would not want to bring in an emerging property manager at the same time.
I think we're all caught up now. Thanks.
Okay, so the next one, you want the lender. This is another one, people don't talk to a lender or investor until they've got their whole deal kind of baked, which is, you got to understand that lenders and investors are wired to say no. Okay. So that's why you want them as part of your vision up front. When you've decided who you want to serve, how you want to serve them, what the market is, and the financial feasibility, that's at the point you want the lender and investor talking to you. Because they have a tendency to like to say no, to find all the risks that are in your deal. And if you got them as a believer in the beginning, it's a lot harder for them to say no once they get further into it, because they've been on your bus through the whole thing. Now they're still going to have hard questions, but it's not going to be outright the first time they see you and they don't know what your vision is. They don't know anything about you. You're more likely going to get a negative response than a positive. So really important that you got the money people up front and you sold them on your vision. Sorry, I jumped because I'm looking at my time. But the next one, again, elected officials. This is where I get into my NIMBY talk, because anytime that you're coming into a community and you're proposing something that people in the community have never seen or experienced, they have their perceptions as to what that is. So they don't want it. And they come up with all these stories about why. So you have to engage, well, first, the elected officials. You got to go to the council people individually. Because first of all, you start with city staff. Okay, you start with, if there's city manager, planning director, building department, you start with them, you get them sold on your vision, because they'll become your biggest champions. Then you go to the elected officials. You want to talk to the mayor, deputy mayor. You want to talk with the city council people, especially the council people that represent the ward you're in. You want them sold on this before it ever gets in front of the public hearing. So from that, if you have support with that, and they're going to tell you all kinds of information about, don't do this, don't say that, don't go to that piece of property. But because they can kill you in a second. So after that, then you got to spend time in the community, holding forums of the neighbors. And you try to dispel all the myth that's going to come. And even then, there are going to be people who are going to show up at public hearing screaming at you about how horrible this is. And I've learned, this is one of the areas I'm glad I'm not in development anymore, because after 15 years of going to public hearings in towns all over the country and being yelled at and escorted out by police and having people slice my tires at, I get out of a hearing at 11 o'clock at night in a town that's 4 hours from where my home is. I mean, the reason that happened is because I didn't do the community work before I got in front of a public hearing. So that's why it's so important that you do as much as you can to personally engage with the community. You listen to them, and if there's things that you can do on that property that makes them comfortable, like maybe a fence or the driveway entrance, maybe, 50 feet further over this way. That's all they want to see, is they want to know that they've been heard, and they want to understand who these people are that you're bringing into their community. Because I'll tell you, man, every single racist prejudice you can think of will come up in these public hearings, but none of the people will say it. They do it with all these stupid stories that they come up with about my sewer, the sewer is going to back up in my basement. The kids are going to get run over by all these seniors driving their cars. Oh no, those people are going to break into my house and do all these bad things to me and my family. It just goes on and on and on. but when it comes down to it, there's always usually some kind of prejudice that drives the stories that you have to be prepared for, and you want to try to explain those things away before they even get said. So there's a lot I can tell. I can do a whole show on just my experiences with NIMBYs and how to do public hearings, which is actually, it's kind of fun. And then the investor, I already included that group in the lender part. You want to talk with any potential investors as part of your lending in the very, very beginning. So let me ask, what did you learn out of this about building a development team? I'm going to call on one of our new people, Jarrell Harris. He just started working for us. I'm going to call on you, Jarrell. What was your take on everything you heard, and what did you take away from this development team presentation?
One, that there are a lot of people that make up your development team in a lot of different areas. Two, to make sure that all those people, based on whatever your development is, that they have experience in it, that they're familiar with it, that they understand it, because your team is really what's going to probably make or break your project. And it's really important to make sure you start putting together the right team at the very beginning.
That's right. Thank you. Well said. Appreciate it. I look forward to meeting you someday.
Okay, absolutely, me too.
Okay. So here we are. You got your development team. What's next? We're going to talk about where most of you will have started this whole process to begin with. It's about site acquisition and site investigation. You notice we haven't talked about site at all until now. But most of you are going to have this offer that comes that there's a free piece of land and somebody's going to give it to you. The church already owns it. It's been in your family for years. And this is where you want to do your development. Why would you not want to do that? Refer back a little bit to what you heard about the market study and what the intent of the market study is, but why would you not want to go down that road in regards to site acquisition or site control? What would be the better way? Wally?
Sure. So the better way would be in the driver's seat to acquire a property that meets your criteria. Just because you get a piece of land doesn't mean that it's something that is really an asset. It could wind up being an albatross around your neck. So that's my answer.
Absolutely right. You're right on, is that you don't take the easy piece ever. Very rarely do you get a site that has a for sale sign on it. There's a reason there's a for sale sign usually, is there's something wrong with it. It's gotten that far. What you want to do is you want to find, it doesn't even have to be for sale. You have to find the best site for the market for who you want to serve, the best possible site you can get. And that's where working with the planning department can be really helpful, because they can kind of tell you, kind of direct you as to where the city planning efforts are focused in regards for what you want to do. And sometimes they know a lot about available land or potentially available land that you might be able to get a rezoning on, land, do not touch that neighborhood will kill you. All those things before you take that, it's all part of your inventory, but you want to walk out the door and be focused on the best piece of property you can get. If you don't do that, there's going to be another developer that comes along, like Tommy Ogden, who's going to come along and he's going to work that the way I just explained it. And he is going to get that best site. While Wally, you're over here working on that free site that you got, and he's going to hit the market right after you get your property done. Guess where everybody's going to want to live? In Tommy's place, not yours. Because he's got the best site, he's got the best location, he's got the best deal. So that's why you want to do the best you can. You're never going to be perfect at it. You want to be the best you can to find the best site for who you want to serve. And When it's not for sale, I find out, I used to do this all the time. I'd go to the assessor's office, find out who owned the property. I'd send them a letter, make an offer. If I didn't hear anything, I'd send another letter. If I didn't hear anything, I'd go to their house and knock on their door right around dinner time. And I had an option agreement all drafted up. And I also brought a nice looking drawing of what the vision was for what we wanted to put on their property. And I tell them the story about, you know, what we're going to do. And it wasn't very often that very rarely I get the door slammed. And I got a lot of options signed on great pieces of property that we ended up doing developments on. So that's part of doing development, is it's hard work. But at the end of the day, remember, who's on the hook for all this? You're the developer owner, right? So that's why you want to mitigate all the risks. Every one of these steps has a risk. And you want every step, you got to mitigate that risk. And site is one of those. The other thing, don't buy that site until you have your approvals. Because every one of those approvals is a chance for somebody to say no and kill your deal. Now, if you've done everything I've said about the perfect development team, you've worked with the local officials, you got your lender investors, you know, up front with you through the whole thing, the likelihood that you'll run into a no is much lower, but there's still a chance. So you don't want to take title to a property until you have the approvals you need, like financing, you know, to do the deal. And then you move to try to close on the same day that you close on your loans. So there's a lot of ways to control properties. You may have to put money down sometimes, but you may, and that money would be at risk to lose, but at least you control it for longer periods of time. And you build into those agreements, you have renewal times, extension agreements, that for a certain amount of money, I'll get another 60 days, that kind of thing. I very rarely would I put money down up front, because I got to do all my due diligence, find out, can I get zoning? Is there environmental issue? Are all the sewer and water hookups there like, you know, I think they are? That 30 days of due diligence on your part as a developer, you need to do. At the end of that 30, then you put some money down. And you put money down every time you get an approval. You get zoning approval, put some more money down. And that money is what we call goes hard. That's at risk. Get site plan approval, you put money down. Get your building permit, you put money down. Get your loan commitment, you put some more money down. So that's my piece on acquiring and finding sites. So we're at a point now where you are going to submit for all your approvals. You're going all the stuff I talked about in the community, zoning, tax abatement, site plan, building permits, all that, all your financing approvals. So your lenders, your investors, grants, other gap sources, they all have applications, all have approvals. Let's see, the team potential brownfields, that would be your architect and engineer are going to be part of that, and the developer, because the developer should understand what brownfields are and should know where to go to figure that information out. Those two together. And usually the architect, you're going to have an environmental consultant here too. They're the ones that go with your architect and you to find out, are brownfields really here or not? So we assume by Friday night at 5 o'clock, all of your approvals arrive. That should be your goal. It won't happen, but that's what you're striving for. So now let's jump to the fun part. Construction. You start construction. What happens? Well, first of all, you're going to have a groundbreaking. You're going to have the mayor, you're going to have the council, you're going to have your development teams. You're all going to stand there with these silver painted shovels. You're going to put these goofy hard hats on that none of them fit you. You're going to have pictures. They're going to give you coffee and donuts. And everybody's going to, want to talk to the mayor about this wonderful deal. And You all walk away, you, the developer, now walks away, and you think you're all set because you got the best contractor on your team to do the work. And so you just kind of walk away, you go on to your next deal. Wrong. You're the owner. That contractor is there to take care of himself, even though he's the best or she's the best, greatest ever. They're going to look out for themselves when it comes to change orders and things like that and getting done on time. You have to be out there constantly checking that site. You should get to know that site superintendent like it's a relative in your family. Because site superintendents, once you get to know them, they love to talk. They're the biggest talkers you'll ever meet. They'll tell you all kinds of things that are going on that site. Because site superintendents typically, they have this animosity towards the owner of the general contracting business. So they like to talk about things. And so you can find out what's going on. You also can go out there and find out how many people, how many of the trades are out there working every day. I think some of you heard me talk on Friday or on Thursday. I used to go out Monday morning and Friday afternoon and count the people who are working, which typically weren't any. So once they knew I was showing up like that, all of a sudden they were working all day long because I'd take them to task about it. Like, wait a minute, I'm paying you. I have all the obligation. You better be out here. And you also start counting, like all the 2x4s are coming on the site. You got to know what's being delivered and stored because theft is an issue. So guess whose pocket that comes out of? So it's really important. You don't walk away from the job. This is really where even the harder work is you have to watch that contractor. So building gets done, hopefully on time and in budget. So what's next is it's your run up or your sales period. This is where the development is being marketed, sold, and leased. Again, guess what happens at this? You're going to have a grand opening. You're going to have balloons out the front. You're going to probably have some shrimp and maybe some champagne this time, no donuts. Same people are going to show up. The mayor, the council, all of that. You're going to have this big red ribbon, these giant scissors that the mayor holds, and the developer, you get to hold these scissors too. And you're going to cut the ribbon. Everybody walks in, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. And again, you as a developer think you've got the wonderful property management marketing agent there and you walk away. Next thing you know, your absorption rate isn't hitting. It's not leasing up fast enough. The houses aren't selling fast enough. You have obligations to investors. You have obligations to your lender. You can't make the payments now because you're not collecting enough rent or you haven't sold enough homes. You have to be, just as what I said in construction, you have to be engaged with the property management company and the people leasing that property or selling the property every week. Every Monday morning, you should get a phone call from the manager, tells you what was the traffic over the weekend, how much of that traffic was solid traffic, how many phone calls did you get during the week, how many phone calls did you follow up on, what's the market intelligence about what you're hearing about the units, what are the pending leases that are out there, how many pending files are waiting for tenant certifications. Are these homeowners actually qualified for a mortgage? So you need to know that all the time because at the end of the day, it's your dime that's going to have to be spent to fix the shortfalls. So you have to be very engaged during the lease up. And again, if you as a developer, if you go back to the beginning, what did you do in the second step? What did you do in that second step? Kenya? I'm sorry, my eyes. Kima? Hansby? What did you as a developer do back in that second step that makes you have the ability to lease those units or sell those units. Well, you as the developer did the market research, right? That's what you started the whole property on, was the market research. So you know the demographic you're trying to attract, you know who you want to serve, you know the demographic of where they live, who they are, where they're coming from. A lot of times you're going to know because you're part of, typically you're in the community, you know what people want. So you have as much role in leasing those units or selling those units as the property management company does. You have huge value to help that management company do their job, because you should know more about the market than they do. Which is another reason you don't walk away and just let them run it. So we're getting close to the end. So the next one is, depending on where your financings come from, there's all kinds of compliance issues that you may have to contend with. There's all kinds of reporting that you have to document for the length of the loan, or if it's an investor. You got to have, again, if you have the right accountant, you have a good property management company, they've got all the systems in place to do all that for you. But if they don't, guess who's in trouble? You are, not them. So you have to ride them hard to make sure that they are making sure that everything is in compliance and that they're reporting on time. So we'll stop here. Is any questions? I know there's a few more that popped up, but has anybody got any questions on this last piece here about construction and the marketing aspect?
I just want some clarity on this, and I think I have it, but I just need it in my head. From what you're saying, even after we get things set up and we break ground, we don't just go back to the office and kick back. We don't just go home, look at Jerry Springer. We don't just wait to hear what's going on. We become even more hands-on. From what you're telling me, I need to be out at the site. I need to see what's going on. I need to check inventory. I need to be, even though I've got foremans and the construction guy, he's got his own company, the whole 90. I'm still the owner. I'm still running the show. That's my question.
You stated the answer even. Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what you should be doing, is be out there all the time. And you're checking, you're asking questions. You know what is going on at that site under construction at all times. You get heads up about where there might be a change order coming. Get a heads up that one of the subs isn't performing and why. That the site, sometimes you'll find the site superintendent is a mess. I've had a number of times where site superintendents were alcoholics and they go on a binger at the job site. And if you aren't out there as an owner, like checking on this stuff, that's a problem, because something happens with a piece of equipment, somebody gets hurt, you know where it's coming. So you really gotta be out there and aware.
Mark, can I challenge every change order, or can I ask for a breakdown of the change order, or can I don't know, should I sound like a pain here? Because I'm understanding that things are going on, and all of a sudden, boom, something pops up that wasn't a part of the budget schedule or anything. So do I have the right to, because I don't want to be a problem to a guy who this is supposed to be his business, but is that my right to say,
Yeah.
hey, this, okay, that's what I'm.
Absolutely, it's your right, because that change order is coming to you to pay. So the sooner you know about a potential change, that's the time that you could call the architect or the engineer, say, hey, they're talking about a change order here on this. I'd like to have you come out and look at it. Is there a better way to doing this, that it doesn't have to be so much money?
Mark, do you mind if I jump in just as a local contractor in Wilmington?
Yeah, there you go.
So the biggest change I'm going to implement in my next upcoming project is to really get the developer together, architect together, and myself together before we start our next project, and try to kind of foresee where that change order, may arise, or talk about bottlenecks where, this 80% of the project, I can't foresee anything happening, but this particular portion of the project is where we could run into that bump and kind of give them those worst case scenarios. Maybe discuss if we run into this issue, maybe we change our countertops from granite to Formica just to save rather than you going out of pocket. And kind of what I've gathered in the last few years in particular is the more you're out in front of it, it's a lot easier than doing it on the back end. So just, that preparedness and being on the same page is huge.
Yep, I think, Tommy, you're the kind of contractor I want to be working with, because there are not a lot of contractors that would say what you just said. So you're the kind of guy that any of you, this is the kind of person you're looking for, is like thinking like that, because they really are, obviously he understands that if you don't approach it that way, there's a lot bigger bills and a lot bigger problems later on if you don't get on top of it in the beginning.
Little things like gutters, not tying into the, the sidewalk, that's a city of Wilmington code that wasn't drawn on the drawings and everybody missed it. And, you'd want to take care of that in the very beginning with the sidewalk and, connect to the sewer and everything like that. And if you do that in the first month rather than the last month, it's a lot cheaper. Everybody's a lot happier. Everybody's expecting it. Just kind of the attention to detail is huge.
Yep. And the thing is that you have to look at the architect, engineer, and the contractor and the property manager as a whole team. I really do. And a lot of people, it's very rarely do you see that, but they are a whole team that if they're in sync with each other, you more likely than not, development's going to come in on budget and it's going to come in on time.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions that people had on actually any of this? I know there was questions popping up. I'm not sure we got to all of them, Roger, but
I think we did in the chat box.
Okay.
I think we're caught up. If I missed anybody, please speak up, but I think we got all of them.
Well, then the last slide is just some general takeaways of looking at what successful elements of successful developments are. Obviously, number one is the quality of that development team. The project characteristics, the evaluation of the development budget, your market, all those three are driven by the market study or the market research that you did. Those three are all tied together. The market research tells you about the characteristics, tells you about the marketability, the rent, the market for sales. And then it's a basis for you to put together your development budget. Operating costs is where you get into having your management company. The other thing is I don't talk about this, but it's something, two things here I didn't talk about. You need to be aware of. In a lot of real estate development, you're going to have to put cash reserves in place that will be held either by the lender or by the investor. That's cash coming out of your deal that could have been a developer fee to you a lot of times, but there's priority that it has to go into a reserve to mitigate the potential risk of loss of rent beyond what your assumption was at a 5 or 8% vacancy rate. There has to be reserves to be able to pay your lender the mortgage every month, and that's a source to be able to do that if you're not collecting enough rent or you haven't sold enough homes. That's something that it's not really negotiable. because there's standards that investors have to adhere to because of their their credit people. So now the thing is there is some leeway on that, where after a few years, if the development's running really, really well, sometimes they'll release those reserves to you as cash for you. That's something that you would want to try to negotiate. Maybe in 5 years, 8 years, that if the project's hitting stability, has a debt service ratio that's way above what the bank loaned you the money on, that you could justify having those reserves released to you, or some part of them. The other thing to be aware of is sponsor reviews. That's you as the developer, guarantees. There are going to be guarantees that you're going to have to make personally to protect the investors or the lenders. First, there's going to be a test on your financial statement, that you have a financial statement to stand behind the potential losses that a lender or investor might have. But they're going to want us to have you, not just corporately, but you individually. They will have you sign a personal guarantee that you will step up and pay for shortfalls, that you will pay for anything that's in non-compliance that could hurt the investors or the lender. And those last for the life of the investment or the loan. Those don't burn off. So, which again, as an emerging developer, the reason we're emerging is that we didn't have a financial statement or the ability to do personal guarantees. So that's again why you find a partner that can do that. It was hard when I was doing development that I was signing a guarantee that was pledging my house. That's a hard decision to make. When you have your house and everything you own online, that you know, in something that you could be in for 5 years or 15 years. And you're counting on all these other people that are around you to, protect you. That's what I'm talking about, being out at the construction site, having the development team members be the best you can find, being there in the marketing and lease up, and being there for the life of that property, make sure the residents are being served in the way you wanted them to be served. Because you've signed personally that you will protect the people who have put all the money into the development. That's why I make such a strong statement about these things. All right. Well, I'd love to answer any other questions or any conversation or anything you'd like to do. And if not, I really enjoyed this. I hope it was beneficial for all of you. Like I said, what I've presented to you is all my failures. So you can't go find a book on it. You can just go read the book of McDaniel and you'll find failures. And that's what I've described for you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Any final questions as we wrap up this session?
I just want to say thank you guys for the time. This is very informative. I learned a lot.
Yeah, me too. We can get a recording of this, right?
Yes, we will circulate the recording in a follow-up email.
Thank you.
So I just would like to thank Mark. Thank you so much for making the time to share all of your failures and lessons learned. It's greatly appreciated. And I'd like to thank everyone else on the line for joining us this evening. We hope you found this information valuable. Along in that follow-up email, you will receive a brief survey following this session, and we would love to receive your feedback on this event as well as topics you'd like to see in the future. We will be holding our Kickstart sessions on a monthly basis, so please provide feedback on information you'd like to receive going forward. So our next Kickstart session will be scheduled in March, so be on the lookout for that invitation. Again, we appreciate your time with us, and I know that most of you are a part of our October cohort, our current cohort, or our future cohort. So it's so great to see you all on the line, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Deanna.